Adam Soos here for Rebel News. We're on location here at the BMO Centre, rolling in style for the UCP's annual general meeting. This is the meeting at which they're going to decide all their policies, and that will form, in very many ways, the identity of the government that leads this province moving forward. Over 3,600 people are expected in attendance here, an incredible record-setting turnout. They've broken records as far as fundraising this quarter, so a great turnout. We're going to be here all weekend covering the events as they unfold.
After an election, there's almost 4,000 people here at this convention, at this AGM. It's not a small thing, especially after an election. Usually you don't see these numbers.
It's because we are leaders. The rest of the country, I think, is starting to take note of some of the stuff that we're doing, everything from the work with people facing addictions to homelessness, our seniors' housing systems. We are the best province in the country. We're not just saying it because that's what every politician says. We are. More people are moving here than any other place in the world, and we continue to do innovative ideas to continue to make sure Alberta is the best place to live.
Danielle Smith has done a better job than any premier in recent memory at really sticking it to Ottawa. And not just Danielle Smith, her ministers.
Alberta is actually one of the only provinces that has some of the strongest protections and rules around parental rights than any other province currently, because the way the law is cultivated and drafted in Alberta, especially with respect to religion and human sexuality, the school division must notify the parents if they're going to be teaching and when they're going to be teaching about those subjects, and the parent has the opportunity to opt out.
Now that we've rolled into the UCP AGM, we've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people, federal politicians, local city councillors, journalists, everyone in between here at the UCP AGM. One of the big questions on people's mind is whether this party will indeed, and without compromise, continue to put Albertans first. So we spoke to a number of politicians, MLAs, ministers, federal and municipal government officials to garner their perspectives on this UCP party and to see if it can be trusted to continue advocating for Albertans.
Once we get that number.
Given that your predecessor faced some troubles with the Public Health Act by not giving Dr. Dina Hinshaw the final say on COVID lockdown measures, how exactly will your government reconcile the Ingram decision with Bill 6?
This is what our legislation was all about. There are other provinces, British Columbia, I believe also New Brunswick and Saskatchewan, that gives elected officials the ability to modify health orders. And when all of the health orders were rendered illegal because we attempted to follow the same kind of approach that we do in any emergency. Remember, I just went through an emergency with the fires in May, and we established an emergency management committee of cabinet, and we listened to advice from our officials. And from time to time, we had to make decisions that cost money or that allowed for us to give the charitable contributions, allowed us to be able to give income supports, allowed us as well to make sure that we were in touch with municipalities. This is the reason politicians have to be involved in these decisions, is there are certain things that technocrats and bureaucrats don't think about. Politicians need to be able to be at the table thinking about those things. So having gone through that in May and then seeing the result of the Ingram decision, it seems to me that is exactly the structure that we need to have for a health emergency. So we're making the change to allow for the cabinet to be the ultimate decision maker on any modifications that may need to come down in health orders in a future public health emergency. I think that's what people expect. People hold politicians to account for decisions that are being made, and if we're to be held for account, we need to be the final decision maker.
Very happy to be now joined by David Parker of Take Back Alberta. One of the questions, one of the themes, the sentiments on trial or on display here, whatever you look at it, is the sentiment of putting Alberta first. Obviously, there was probably a lot of excitement around Jason Kenney's leadership and the sentiment that he would put Alberta first.
Yes.
That pretty quickly evaporated, but do you sort of get, your organization works a lot about putting Alberta first, advocating for Alberta's interests. Do you trust that that's the direction the party's moving now?
Absolutely. I think that this is all the evidence you need, that the people of Alberta are rising up and they're saying, no, Ottawa, we're not letting you abuse us anymore.
This party has come a long way. You yourself were ejected from the party for espousing some of the values that are being promoted by this party today. Do you think the party really has changed?
Yeah, I think so. I think the leadership has changed, and I think that's kind of the basis of a lot of the changes right there. I think MLAs are being listened to more, cabinet ministers being listened to more, and I think the people of Alberta are having a chance to to have a say too. And so there's been some dramatic changes. And when I look at the number of people here today, it's just really exciting to see this movement going forward. We have people from all across Alberta, people from all walks of life, and they're all here, just to get together as Conservatives and see if they can make Alberta a better place. And when we look at some of the policies that we're working on, these are policies that will benefit all Albertans, not just Conservatives, but all Albertans can benefit from these policies. And as we see these come forward, I think Albertans will realize that good, solid Conservatism is good government, and it makes a difference in their lives.
We just had a provincial election here inside of Alberta where Albertans overwhelmingly once again elected in another majority UCP government that we're all happy to see, because we're seeing after 8 years of Justin Trudeau, not only is the cost of living high, but Canada has never been so broken. Whether we're talking about a divide that he's made between people, regions, even between the different groups of people.
Right.
Canada has never been more divided, and neither has Confederation. That's why I think in Alberta people recognize that we could not afford another Rachel Notley NDP and Justin Trudeau alliance once again, because that would be detrimental to Alberta, Albertans, and our resource sector.
Underneath the Premier Smith's leadership, you will see after the Liberal attacks, the union attacks, the media attacks, she came out on the other side and is getting more and more popular every day because she stands up for everyday Albertans. She stands up for Calgarians. You saw her speech. She addressed affordability issues, very, very important. Safety issues, very, very important to me. And she always picks up the phone.
I think that the political fault lines have changed, and I think COVID was a big part of that. The old left-right divide, the old Tory-Liberal divide, really doesn't adequately describe the fault lines in politics now. I think you see a lot more of a libertarian insurgency, if you will, in Canadian politics, and specifically in Alberta politics. And I think you see a lot more people focused on that, individuality. And I think that the status quo is not working for people. Federally, you hear Pierre Poilievre talk about that with the line, Canada is broken. But I think in Alberta, they've seen the Confederation is broken, at least for Albertans it is. So I don't think that the party has changed in a drastic way, but I do think it's evolved with the political sentiments of the people of Alberta. I mean, Danielle Smith, before there was even a vacancy in the UCP leadership, when Jason Kenney was still Premier, was talking about very Alberta first things. So I don't think this is a pivot that has come about from her return to politics. I think this is something she's been very consistent on. In that sense, I also think that she's been able to, now that she is Premier, look at some of the errors of the Jason Kenney government beyond COVID and just on dealing with getting Alberta a fair deal and say, no, I don't want to be a Premier that's going to let that, bubbling independence vibe really become more of a boil.
Do you suspect that this is indeed a party? We've heard a lot of talk about sort of putting Alberta first, standing up for Alberta industries, putting whether it be the cities, whether it be the rural areas first. But what would you point to as indicators or signs, or are you working on anything that really suggests that Alberta is going to be put first by the UCP?
Well, I think, talking about the possibility of an Alberta pension plan has certainly put the rest of country on notice that Alberta matters in a big way. And the conversation nationwide is really exciting. I think Albertans are excited no matter what side of the fence you are in this thing. If you're still in the middle, there's been really good signs and action taken by this Premier and this government that are definitely signaling that Alberta is coming first.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of those issues there. Let's talk about those. Is there something in particular or a policy here that has you interested that you think Albertans, Calgarians, particularly people in your area, are most concerned about?
Two things: affordability, which we're seeing as our province prospers, as we invest in keep our industries and our energy industries prosperous. That helps as well. But crime and safety, which is one of my biggest things, is public social disorder, open air drug use. Her government is paying serious attention to these things. They've funded to both of the major cities 100 police officers, boots on the ground, peace officers. We're looking at different ways with the compassionate care, which I'd like to see come into effect here in the spring, where we can take these, unfortunately, some people are mental health issues or drug addictions. They're left on the streets, and it's just not acceptable to sit there and watch them suffer or die. We need to help them, and I believe the province's policies are on track to do that.
One thing I think that hits home with everybody's healthcare. We have issues with healthcare. We've had them for a long time. We need to do some dramatic changes to get things back on track, and I think we can be a beacon for Canada as far as how we operate as Conservatives and how we handle things like healthcare issues.
Anything to do with gender. healthcare. This was an issue where at the Conservative Convention in Quebec City, we saw overwhelming support for policies that put parents front and center, that reject gender transitions for children. And a lot of these are provincial decisions, if you look at healthcare and education. And Danielle Smith has actually been somewhat timid on these issues. So I would love to see where the members of the UCP are. I suspect it's going to be a pretty resounding margin, even larger perhaps than the federal Conservatives had. But I think that will be interesting to see, and then how the elected government responds to it.
We have sent out our list of how we wanted things to go. I would say that the one that's most important to our organization is the tabulators, getting rid of electronic voting in this province of any kind, and that's my number one issue as Take Back Alberta, and that's the biggest issue here. We've also see a lot of stuff on healthcare, freedom in healthcare, freedom in education. These are all very important, but a lot of these that have been submitted, almost all of them that have been submitted by Take Back Alberta Constituency Association. So I think Take Back Alberta is driving this particular annual general meeting.
Those communities that you represent, whether it be seniors, whether it be the marginalized, the authentically marginalized, they're the people who often suffer the brunt of the burden of some of the policies that are being pushed by the federal Liberal NDP coalition, whether it be paying their bills, struggling to get by, whatever it is. They are the people who suffer the most. What is this government doing to advocate for those people?
Well, first of all, I want to start with the carbon tax. I mean, that is the single biggest destructive force on our economy, but it's also really impacting the social services sector, how much it costs us to even heat homeless shelters. And of course, our fixed income seniors trying to pay their bills. And so we're fighting the terrible environmental policies of the federal government, not just for economic purposes, but because it impacts people's daily lives. We're also laser focused on building affordable housing. The federal government has created an inflationary mess that has really destroyed our housing industry across the country. So we're working on that. And then most importantly, I think we're focused on proper drug treatment recovery plans. The federal government wants to continue to put poison in Albertans' arms. We want to get them to real treatment and be able to help people move on with productive lives.
There's sort of a tension between increasing taxes, providing increased services, calls from some even for increased AISH, and sustaining a sustainable budget and not overburdening people. How are you striking that balance with the costs being so high? Is there plans to increase AISH, community support, any of that?
Well, we indexed AISH, so now AISH will continue to increase with the inflationary pressures that we face, and we want to make sure people are paid fair. We're proud to have the most generous social services supports in the country, and we're going to continue to. But we're also really focusing on finding efficiencies elsewhere in the department, things like using computer systems different, staffing programs that are different, to free up money to make sure those resources aren't going to unions, that they're going to frontline people that need them, whether it's employees or individuals who need things like AISH, persons with development disabilities, or children with disabilities.
With the sort of advocacy of Alberta Industries, has there been sort of an uptick or a surge in interest or investment or anything within trade schools?
Absolutely. We have had a record number of registrants enter the apprenticeships, and we have a major labor shortage. Lots of investment coming into the province, so we need more people though. So the numbers have ticked up, but we definitely still have a shortage. I don't have a direct federal counterpart, so I mean there are no issues. There's very little interference in the post-secondary sector, and we want to keep it that way.
Yeah. And on your specific ministry in relation to forestry, obviously we know the energy sector is under constant attack. Does forestry encounter those same problems? How's the industry doing?
The industry isn't doing too bad right now. There is a bit of an attack all the time on forestry too. People seem to want to see the landscape exactly the way they see it. Then they forget that over time we've had fires go through, we've had forestry in the past, and so looking at it in a picture of time right now isn't really fair, because the way that landscape is now is as a result of what's happened in the past, which is wildfire and forestry operations in the past. So that part is good, because we had a big wildfire season, and that is going to hit the forestry industry hard because it's taken up a lot of their product there. So
next door to the Saddledome, the new arena is coming in. Some people celebrating the sentiment of a new arena, others sort of bemoaning the expenditure by a conservative government. Sort of, where do you come down on that, and what is the sort of justification? Are the returns going to pay for themselves? What was the basis for that decision?
Well, I think this is a huge win for the city of Calgary. It's a huge win for the province of Alberta. If you look at how well things have played out in Edmonton with the ice district and just the whole area, how it's been developed to be very pro-tourism and attract a lot of events we just couldn't have had in the past. So, Saddledome clearly has some things that make it a tough venue to do some certain events. events like concerts and such. So, this is great for tourism. It's going to fill hotel rooms. It's going to support the local economy. It's obviously great for the Flames. And, as a government, we felt it's important to, put resources towards the infrastructure around. Obviously, we're not funding the arena, but the areas around there, things like interchanges and working with transportation. So I'm quite happy about it. I think it's great for the city of Calgary and great for tourism for the province.
Premier Scott Moe advocating and advancing parental rights and insisting that parents are the primary educators of their children. Are there plans for the UCP or the provincial government here in Alberta to take similar steps to enshrine parental rights?
Right. Well, there's no question that parents are the best directors of their kids' education. This is something that we as a party firmly believe in. Back in 2020, we passed the Choice in Education Act. We worked to enshrine the rights of parents as it relates to their child's education in law. So that's something that's very important to us. We're talking as a cabinet, we're talking as a caucus, and with parents and teachers about some of these other changes, and we'll see where those conversations lead us. Our government firmly believes in the importance of choice in education. We believe that having that diversity of options helps, what we said earlier, helps parents be the best directors of their kids' education. So we're absolutely committed to that. In fact, it was reflected in the throne speech a couple of days ago. So that's something that folks can continue to rely on.
Let's say there's inappropriate books, literature being shared in a classroom. Is that a place where a government should say, well, is it already illegal because it's showing inappropriate content? Where's the sort of line on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't think there are any clear lines around that currently within the legislation that we have. As I mentioned, school divisions have that authority to provide resources. There is a list of resources that are approved by the government, right? Resources that are suggested and recommended for the teaching of the curriculum. But of course, schools have discretion to kind of supplement that. But there are always strong protections in place. Alberta is actually one of the only provinces that has some of the strongest protections and rules around parental rights than any other province currently, because the way the law is cultivated and drafted in Alberta, especially with respect to religion and human sexuality, the school division must notify the parents if they're going to be teaching and when they're going to be teaching about those subjects, and the parent has the opportunity to opt out. And I don't think any other province in Alberta has that level of rights and protection for parents.
How much do you think this sort of surge in excitement and anticipation stems from Alberta getting a raw deal? How much of it is new leadership? What do you think is sort of feeding this frenzy?
I think it's a combination of factors. I definitely think it's new leadership as well. And certainly the election results have shown that we need to do better. We need to win back those seats. And I think people are just really waking up to the reality that you have to get involved. But this is incredible. You can feel the energy, and who knows exactly what the reasons are, but it's a good thing to have this many people here.
I think that the raw deal is there, and that's going to galvanize a lot of political support in Alberta, but there needs to be someone there who can channel that, and Danielle Smith has done a better job than any premier in recent memory at really sticking it to Ottawa, and not just Danielle Smith, her ministers. I mean, Minister Rebecca Schultz, who was just speaking a few moments ago, has been like a constant thorn in Stephen Guilbeault's side, which Alberta needs. So I think that the energy would have been very different if the people here were not happy with how the Alberta government is standing up to the Trudeau government.
You can trust the numbers, right? Like, the proof is in the pudding, and when record high numbers are participating in the political process, you can't go wrong. This is a good thing, no matter which way you shake it out.
I think people are realizing they have to get involved. Period. End of story. I think that a lot of speeches have been given, not just by me, by a lot of different people, saying if you don't do something now, Dennis Modry's another great example of people who've been giving a lot of speeches. I would say if we don't do something now, we're going to lose everything we have. And so people are realizing that.
Seeing this many people in this room here really tells me that this conservative movement is alive and well. I'm really happy with the direction the government's going as the government House leader, with the bills coming forward, and also with the excitement that we generated since the election. And there's a bright future for Alberta. We have, and our greatest asset are the people that live here, and we're seeing a lot of them, thousands of them here, right here behind me. And that's a huge win for the province, huge win for the party. and I think it's just great all around.
After an election, there's almost 4,000 people here at this convention, at this AGM. It's not a small thing, especially after an election. Usually you don't see these numbers, but it just goes to show how much momentum there is. But more importantly, it shows the unity that we have in Alberta. That's one thing I've seen, that the leadership of a Conservative government now under Premier Danielle Smith. I've seen her being able to bring everyone together, and that's what we're seeing here today. A lot of excitement.
Yeah, Alberta seems to be taking, rather than an apologetic role or a follow the leader role, a leadership role on so many of these issues. Can you comment on that a little bit?
It's because we are leaders. And, the rest of the country, I think, is starting to take note of some of the stuff that we're doing, everything from the work with people facing addictions to homelessness, our seniors' housing systems. We are the best province in the country. We're not just saying it because that's what every politician says. We are. More people are moving here than any other place in the world. And we continue to do innovative ideas to continue to make sure Alberta is the best place to live.
Now, do you think that there is just a general trend and a shift away from, whether it be wokeness, whether it be radical environmentalism, whatever it is? You can even look at, not our NDP government opposition, they're one of the most extreme, but you look at even NDP federally now siding with the federal Conservatives on the carbon tax. You look at even the NDP in Manitoba, they're conservative compared to our NDP. Is there a shift taking place culturally?
Well, and Saskatchewan too is supporting the Premier Moe's government in his call against the federal government and the unfair allocation of the carbon tax. So I think this woke movement is on notice, one might say, and I think people are just ready for common sense leadership generally, because we don't have a lot of time for the rest of the bull out there. And I think in a short period of time as well, in my humble opinion, based on things that are happening, when the Trudeau Liberals decided to make it pretty blatant how unfair and how unenvironmental this carbon tax actually is, the country is paying attention, and it's not lost on the majority, the vast majority of smart Canadians, no matter where their political allyship lies, that the Trudeau government is just a big sham. And so does this end up in court? Does this end up in a change in leadership? Does this end up in an election? I think all things are very possible.
There's also someone who's taking a stand on the federal stage, and it has garnered quite a bit of support. We are seeing the polling clearly trend in favor of the Conservative Party. Talk a little bit about your leader.
Definitely our Conservative leader, the next Prime Minister, the Honourable Pierre Poilievre, has been not only on the same message about affordability, but being able to unite Canadians, and we see that stronger than ever right now, not just in the polls, but our leader has been all over this country and connecting with those people that are hurting, and that's all we see around around this country. We will be bringing home lower prices. We're going to bring home more freedom. We're going to make sure that we bring home more homes that people can afford. We need to bring down this deficit, because as the Governor of the Bank of Canada said, who confirmed what our leader has been saying all along, that it's the government deficit that fueled inflation, that made interest rates go up, and now Canada's most at risk in the G7 of a mortgage default crisis. We're going to bring unity, freedom, and lower prices back for Canadians, because it's going to be a common sense Conservative government under a common sense leader that's going to actually unite Canadians. After 8 years of Justin Trudeau, we've seen this country divided more than ever, and we're going to turn the hurt that Canadians are seeing today into the hope that Canadians deserve.
It's very refreshing to see a number of elected officials unapologetically advocating for Alberta and insisting that they are going to continue to put Alberta first. It has been too long that we've been apologizing for our industries, apologizing for the approach that we take, and apologizing, frankly, for footing the bill for the rest of Canada. These folks know that Alberta is one of the best places to live in the world, and they are continuing to advocate for it unapologetically. That is what we need more of. We had a great opportunity all weekend here at the UCP AGM to cover so many stories, to talk to so many people. You can find all of that coverage at rebelnews.com. And as always, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. Good.
Good job.
Hey, thanks very much. Appreciate that. I got to ask, that's an awesome shirt. Where did you get it?
Well, Rebel News, of course.
Rebel News. So if you want to get shirts like this, it's great to see people have conversations like this. Always something for everyone, whether you're about firearms rights, putting your church first, about civil liberties, whatever it is. There's something for you at rebelnewsstore.com. And as always, you can use the code Adam10 if you haven't already to get 10% off your order. I'm wearing a shirt from the Rebel News Store. He's wearing a shirt from the Rebel News Store. You can wear a shirt from the Rebel News Store too at rebelnewsstore.com.